Today I have the honor of interviewing Heather Thomas. She's a drummer and a singer-songwriter. She's released multiple projects available on digital streaming platforms, and she has a new single dropping this July 7th. I'm gonna bring her into the interview to talk about her drumming, the way she drums and sings, which I find incredibly unique, her new music coming up, her constant performing, and a little bit about her life. Hi,
Hello.
thank you so much for joining the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having
You're very,
me.
very welcome. I'm really excited to talk with you about your music and how unique what you do is. And we talked about this a little bit before. You're rare amongst rare, you know? So like, there's people who like singing and performing is just amazing to them and just musicians in general. But additionally, you know, the drumming and the singing is and you're such an accomplished drummer, right? So it's like, you know, so we're gonna jump into all that. You have a
Sure.
single coming up, you give drum lessons, you've toured the country, you've worked with, you know, I would say hundreds of bands at this point. So
Yeah.
we're gonna talk about all this, but if you could just, you know, to start off, take us on your musical journey, how you fell in love with music, how you first got started in it, what happened first, the drumming, the singing, how it all came to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I started playing drums first. I was in fifth grade band. Is when I started playing drums, and it was, I was playing snare drum and like bells, and I would bring my snare drum to school in a suitcase attached to a little dolly, and I thought drums were the coolest even back then. And yeah, that's how I started, and I got drum lessons after that, and I ended up going to school for percussion performance. I went to Central Washington University and got a degree in percussion. And yeah, and then I moved to Seattle. I'm from Puyallup originally, so that's like kind of a little bit south of Seattle. And then I moved to Seattle and started playing in a bunch of bands. And like you said, hundreds of bands by now at this point. It's probably, uh, you know, probably closer to 200. And yeah, and then I joined Mary Lambert, and she was signed to Capitol Records. So we got to do a lot of really cool touring and do some, live television and things like that. And I started singing and writing my own songs. And that was kind of a result of a number of things. Like playing with Mary was really impactful because I got to see how much it impacted people, how her singing and telling her story was really changing people's lives. And in addition to that, I was also living with some songwriters, and we would just sit around their living room or our living room
Yeah.
and just sing each other's songs. I thought it was the coolest thing. I was like, man, I need to write some songs. So I took a songwriting course online from Berkeley, and it was free. It was free songwriting course, and I started taking voice lessons. Yeah, it was like they were doing this thing through Coursera where they were offering free courses, and so I took the songwriting one, and that really set me up for success in terms of being able to write songs that didn't sound like angsty teenager songs, but nothing wrong with those. But
Love songs and broken heart songs are awesome.
yeah, yeah, and there's ways to like convey those feelings and emotions in ways that kind of show the story instead of just tell people what's happening. You can really kind of put people in your shoes. So yeah, and then I started traveling around the country by myself in 2020, which was a weird time to do it. I didn't know that when I
Right.
left, but
January 2020, the world was still normal.
yeah. And I left on January 1st, and I had the goal of spending each month living in a different city. And so I traveled around the whole country and spent each month in a different city. And I still did it even through the pandemic. It slowed me down a little bit that first month. I was stuck in Texas for like the first 6 weeks of lockdowns.
Yeah.
And then I kept going. I kept relocating every month to a new place.
Wow.
And then made it back to Seattle and started kind of working on a new album. And when I felt like it was time to record that, I drove down to California and I found a producer in LA. and recorded that album down there. And
Which,
then
which
and then I
was that Places and People, or People and Places?
no, so this is the new album that's not out yet. Yeah,
Oh,
so
oh,
I'm
oh.
releasing a new album sometime soon, and the single I'm about to release is the first single off of that album. It's a 12-song album, so there's a lot of new music coming out.
Oh, wow. Well, we covered
Yeah,
ground, and thank you for sharing all of that. You
yeah,
mentioned the album. We can't leave people hanging. We have to jump right into it. The new
sure.
single called If I Die,
Hmm.
available for pre-save now on
Yep,
Spotify and other digital streaming platforms.
right.
It comes out July 7th.
Yes.
Tell us about the song and tell us about the new album.
Absolutely. So the song is, so on the recording, what you'll hear is I'm singing and playing drums and percussion and an instrument called the marxophone, which is kind of like it's almost like a hammer dulcimer where you press down a button and it like puts a hammer down and the hammer bounces on the string. So it's got a cool, interesting sound, almost sounds like a harpsichord or a mandolin or something.
Mm,
And yeah, and so I'm singing and drumming at the same time. And the other session players on the album are Fred Tackett from Little Feat and Sebastian Steinberg, who he actually plays bass with Fiona Apple, and he was in this band called Soul Coughing. And he's awesome. The session players on the gig were just so great. And I recorded it at Carriage House Studio in Silver Lake, Los Angeles, with Sheldon Gomberg producing and Kevin Smith on engineering.
wow.
And yeah, and so it's kind of like a rock Americana, kind of high energy song. I think it's got a real catchy melody to it. And the bridge is kind of funky too. So I'm excited to share it with everyone. I've started sharing clips of just the first verse, so I've given kind of a teaser
Right.
at this point.
That is
Yeah.
awesome. I'm very excited to hear this
Yeah.
and the album. I'm sure your fans are very excited because this will be the first project that you're releasing since
Yeah.
2019.
Yeah.
Right? We had a
Hmm.
pandemic in between, and you
We sure
gig
did.
a lot. You gig.
Yeah.
You're gigging right after this.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, right after this, I'm playing down on Broadway. I live in Nashville now, and so I have a Broadway gig tonight from 6 to 10 at a bar called Layla's. And so that'll be fun. I'm looking forward to that.
That's gonna be awesome. The
Yeah,
So I want to unpack the album a little bit, right? So you told us where
sure.
you recorded it. So it's going to be 12 songs.
Hmm.
Are you thinking about, because you have really great visuals. We took a clip to promote this with you playing the drums and singing,
Yeah.
which visually it just looks so cool too,
Yeah.
right? It's almost like for people who are non-drummers, drumming's amazing, and to keep rhythm like that, to be able to do that and at the same time keep a melody and perform your heart out the way you do
Yeah.
is super impressive. And to see it on video, kind of just, you're probably used to it, but I think most people are always like, wow, that's not every day. It looks amazing.
Yeah, and you really don't see it that often. There are some really great singing drummers, but you don't see it every day.
Yeah.
So I think people are really kind of thrilled to see somebody doing that. And I always joke with people that it's about as hard as it looks. So it is not easy, and but it's like anything with music where you practice it a lot, and then something that's very difficult becomes second nature almost. So I always encourage drummers to try singing because I think it is really satisfying. And as a drummer in the band, you can really add a lot of support if you're singing harmonies or backgrounds, or if you want to write your own songs and sing your own songs. It's a really powerful way to connect with people and to tell a story.
Yeah. So I want to unpack the album completely and then jump into, because you have so many
Sure.
stories, right? Yeah, like I want to jump all over the place, but I want to make sure that we give the album like
Yeah.
its proper moment. Does it have a title yet that you can share?
I'm calling it Dig On Down. Yeah.
What does that mean? Does it have to do with struggle?
Yeah, so there's the title track to the album is kind of a kind of it's got kind of an epic, almost cinematic vibe to it. but the lyrics are pretty repetitive. It's almost like a mantra. It doesn't really have verses and choruses. It's just kind of this one phrase that I repeat over and over. And the phrase is, "You're caught in the mud, dig on down. It's time to turn it around." And that's it. I repeat that over and over. And I wrote that song with Maya Manser down in Los Angeles. And Maya, some of my friends or fans might remember her from playing in Mary Lambert's band. And she's an incredible singer-songwriter and doing a really, really great job with her own original stuff out in LA. And she's like an incredible singer and really cool songwriter. So I wrote that song with her in 2020 at the beginning of that year when I was traveling around and playing music with different people. Yeah, and so that's the title track, and it is just kind of the feeling of resilience, where when you find yourself, struggling with something or caught in a pattern or something, our instinct is sometimes to try and ignore it or try and avoid it. But my encouragement is to dig on down and kind of get to the bottom of it and, take responsibility for turning it around. And to me, the imagery is like if you've ever had to get a car unstuck from the mud.
Yeah.
You can't just spin your tires. You have to,
right.
Yeah, you kind of have to like dig it out around it. You maybe put down some rocks underneath, maybe some wood, something to give it traction. And it's kind of just, to me, that's a metaphor for sometimes if you're stuck, you have to do some work to get yourself unstuck. You can't just move forward from there. You have to kind of stop, take a pause, think about what can I do to get myself out of this. And sometimes it is, you got to dig a little bit deeper and get out of the rut that you're in.
That's awesome. And, in preparation for our interview, I went through like some other interviews you've done, and you touched on this topic. It was a fascinating conversation. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going to be so cool to talk to. Where you talked about facing fears, and you talked about how the void. You talked about the void. Yeah, that was such a great interview. Like I'm sitting there, like eating my lunch, like listening to it, like being, blessed with this knowledge from an artist that you're quite resilient. As we mentioned, you moved to Seattle. You've played in over 100 bands. You lived in different cities during the pandemic while people were afraid in their homes. You were out living in different places.
Yeah.
You're a full-time working, performing, recording musician. You can learn a band set in an hour. You can fit in and you're incredibly resilient, but you have a perspective, maybe a life philosophy for adversity that you shared in that interview where you talked about the void, and we all have that, but how you handle that. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So that was an interview I did with Drumeo, and that was also back at the beginning of 2020, when I had just kind of set out on that journey, before encountering a lot. And, even by then I had already, it takes a lot of guts to leave. And it also, I had already had my car broke down one time, like the day that I left, of course,
Of course.
And, and so what I was talking about, we were talking about the idea of how a lot of people will express this feeling of a void, like an emptiness inside, and our instinct is to try and fill the void with things, like you put stuff in there, like hobbies or habits or friends or people that you care about, or substances, or any number of things that kind of might try and possessions, buying things, achieving things, whatever. And my thought was that the void is not something to be filled up, but it is a way to dig into ourselves to uncover what's at the bottom of it. And, that kind of the presence that you have when you're the awareness, and not necessarily identifying with the ego or the thoughts or your body. And the way that I think about us putting all those things in there is that when you do decide to finally, stop trying to fill it up and instead go into it to you know, to dig deeper into yourself, you end up coming across all these layers of things that you've put in the void, right? So if it's addictions, or if it's unhealthy relationships or possessions or whatever, you have to get through those to get even deeper. So it's like trying to fill up that space is almost delaying the work you're going to have to do to get past all those things when you finally do decide to confront the reality of who you are on the inside. But yeah, that was, I don't know where I came up with that, but you know, it's just something you hear people talk about all the time, about the void. And I found it really helpful to think about it not as something to fill up, but instead something to explore and to make peace with.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. And, you know, it kind of touches on more consciousness, spirituality, philosophy, but you're using it in real life in your career. And that's where it kind of meets music and what you're doing as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
It's scary sometimes to do new things, to try new things,
Totally.
new cities, new bands, new technologies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you mentioned this was an interview you did with Drumeo. With Drumeo,
Mm-hmm.
they have like drum lessons on, you
Yeah.
know, video lessons. That's you're a featured artist in their drum
Yeah.
lessons. But that was a learning curve that you're like, all of a sudden you got to be in front of a camera, you know? So it's like constantly
Totally.
this perspective you have, you're willing to take on
Mm-hmm.
challenges, even if you feel fear, you know?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
find that really great. I think people need to hear that. It's inspirational.
Yeah, I have a quote on my wall that I wrote down, and it's a Carl Jung quote, and the quote is, "Where your fear is, there is your task." And that, uh, and I read a book called The Gift of Fear, which is a really wonderful book to read that really kind of connects you with what your instincts are. And we walk around being afraid of a lot of things that are not happening, you know, things that are in your head, scenarios that are potential. But your nervous system and your human perception is very well attuned to actual danger.
Mm.
And so if you can learn to differentiate between when you're experiencing actual danger and when you're not actually in danger, then you can kind of identify in your language, like if you say, well, I'm just afraid of this. I'm afraid that people won't like it, or I'm afraid that I'm not going to be good enough for this, or whatever it is. When you say I'm afraid of, then well, I've tried to make a practice of, when I catch that language,
Mm.
doing that thing. So if you're afraid to go to another city where you don't know anybody, you need to go to a city where you don't know anybody, and you'll learn a lot, and it's not that scary. And you know, and it's hard because when you want to do things that other people would be afraid to do, they will tell you all the
They'll
reasons that you should be
dump their
afraid to do
fears
it.
on you.
Yeah. And that happened to me a lot before I left Seattle for my year of travel. I had so many people telling me that, you know, warning me about all the things that could go wrong,
Mm.
or, you know, and I was like, I know about all those things. I've been around just as long as anybody has. And I have chosen to not be afraid of those things. I've chosen to go on in spite of that. And so, yeah, and that's where you grow, and that's where you learn a lot. And I think that evolution in general happens at that brink of where most people are afraid, but then somebody does it anyway. And that's when something changes. That's when we evolve as a species, when innovations happen, or when great artists break new ground. It's where other people would be afraid to go that somebody goes.
Oh, that's thank you so much. That is awesome. Um, we could talk about this the entire show, but I want to make
Yeah.
sure we tap into so many things that you've done. I want to unpack a little bit the 2020 New
Hmm.
City Every Month.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not even sure what to call it. Tour. I guess the New City Every Month tour.
Yeah.
It happened. So you take off from Seattle January 1st, 2020.
Hmm.
Like January, I don't know, 13th. March 13th, 2020, the world shuts down. You keep
Yeah.
going. There were some minor delays, but you kept going.
Yeah.
Tell us some of the places that you stayed at. You're in Nashville now.
Hmm.
You went to different cities. You've kind of been to the best cities probably.
Yeah.
Did you pick Nashville for a reason? You know, different things like that, like what you got out of that
Yeah.
adventure and
Yeah.
amazing experience.
Yeah. So one of the things that I was trying to accomplish in spending each month in a different city was I wanted to explore a lot of different music scenes. When you go to a new city, it's a whole new scene full of different people, and every city has its own unique identity and the way that they do things and the music that's popular. And you know, so I wanted to go explore a bunch of different cities. And I kind of had the idea that I might move somewhere. I wasn't sure if I was gonna, you know, come back to Seattle or if I was gonna end up somewhere else. I was just open to new possibilities.
Yeah.
And so I picked kind of my top 10 favorite cities for music. And I picked 10 cities plus Seattle was my month back, and then the month of November I traveled back. So I toured through that month.
Yeah.
And so the cities I picked, and I rerouted it a little bit during the pandemic because some of those cities were a little bit
More
sketchier to,
strict or something.
yeah, or there was just, it was so hard to navigate during that time that I had to kind of let go of the plan and choose based on what was the most available option at the time.
Mm.
So my original route was Los Angeles, the Bay Area, Austin, Texas, and then New Orleans,
Yeah.
and Atlanta, Memphis, Nashville, Chicago, New York, Philadelphia. Those were the 10, and then I toured back and went to Seattle.
And that's big.
And
that's basically it. That's all the music cities. Like you were basically,
exactly.
you got all the music cities.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're all so different, you know, depending on where you live, it really makes a big difference. And that was something that was really highlighted by the pandemic, was that depending on where you lived, the experience was very different for you. And it had a lot to do with kind of the general attitude of the place, the government that was in place in a certain place, and also the weather made a big difference. You know, when we could only go do things outside, if you lived somewhere cold, there were less options. And so I had experienced how different it was from place to place. And when I ended up moving to Nashville, one of the things that helped with that decision was that I had been in Nashville recently enough to know that if I went there, there would be gigs, there would be people ready to play music.
Yeah.
And, you know, I waited a lot of the pandemic out in the California desert, just kind of hanging out with a small community of people, not playing shows, not booking. And because of that, also not making any money, because that's how I make my living.
Yeah.
And so when I finally decided, okay, it's 2022, it was May, and I was like, I think things are starting to open back up to music in different places. And so I picked Nashville because I knew that it was just back up and running and people were playing gigs, and that was what I wanted to do. And so it was kind of an easy decision to make once I finally made that call to get out of the desert.
Yeah. What an amazing experience. So you're in Nashville now, and Tennessee in general was more open. During the pandemic, I was in DC, which is where I'm originally from, and I wound up going to the South. I wound up going through Missouri, Arkansas. I had family there. It was night and day difference.
Right.
They were
well,
open.
And that was
They
what
were
was
open.
wild, is it was so different depending on where you were, and most of us stayed in the same place the whole time.
Yeah.
So you didn't really have a gauge for what it was like other places. But because I had traveled around during that year, I knew how different it was depending on where you were. And, you know, there's positives and negatives to all different ways of handling things. You know, there's not like one way is better than the other. There's just like, humans are so varied and people responded really differently. And so, you know, I made my own choices, and I made sure that I never let, you know, other people's ideas of what I should be doing affect what I was doing. And I also made sure that I didn't let my decisions help me judge anyone else for how they responded. Like, it was very important to me. You know, it was such a hard time to navigate for everyone. And like, I was transient at the time. I didn't have a place to go back to in Seattle. So I was like, I'm making my choices based on a very different set of
That's right.
realities than other people are.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you know, after what felt like as much time as I could handle in the desert not playing music, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready. You know, I feel like it's time
Yeah.
to start playing music, you know. And that's what I chose. I chose to come to Nashville.
So one of the questions that came up, and maybe it's Nashville, or maybe that just because there's so many dynamics with the pandemic and
Yeah.
different, because you do studio work also. So
Hmm.
Nashville provides you the opportunity to perform the
Yeah.
Hector Thomas Band as a drummer and vocals with other bands, and
Yeah.
then there's studio work that you do as a drummer on other
Totally.
albums and things like
Yeah.
that. And Nashville gives you all of that.
Yeah.
Plus, they were very open pretty quickly.
Yeah.
The South was
Yeah.
open, like I would say, it happened in March. They were open like in May.
Right.
May things started like opening up a little bit.
Yeah.
Was Nashville your favorite? Is there another favorite? Do you think you'll be there for a long period of time? Or is there still some like itches you want to scratch because you liked it there, but there was a pandemic going on?
Right. I love traveling, and so all those places I will continue to go back to. I love a lot of different cities and their scenes. One of my favorites for sure is Austin. I love the music scene in Austin. I love going down there and playing shows, and like the whole music culture in that town is really cool. It's very much like live music and original bands, and it's so cool. I really, really love New Orleans. The music scene in that town is so unique and really cool. I love playing music down there. Yeah, and I think Nashville won as a place to live for a lot of different reasons. And like the longer that I'm here, the more I like it. Like I really appreciate so many things about this town. Um, but yeah, those are some other ones that are also on my list that I really love spending time in Austin and New Orleans. Um, yeah,
Those are
definitely.
cities. Yeah, those are great cities.
Yeah.
One of
Hmm.
the questions that popped up was any pointers or lessons learned on how to book tours or how to, kind of navigate the being an independent musician reality that
Sure.
you're experienced that.
Yeah. So booking tours, there's a lot of logistics involved, and I really don't like booking tours
Yeah.
because I feel like you send out hundreds of emails and most people don't get back to
Right.
you. And then there's so much, every single show you got to negotiate with the booker and like try and promote, and like it's a whole mess. And so I prefer to go on tours that other
Right.
people have booked.
You're,
Um,
you're just getting a check.
but yeah, exactly. But when I was traveling by myself, it was a little bit easier to find accommodations because I could just like sleep in someone's guest bedroom or crash on their couch. Whereas when you have a band, you have to really think about,
Right.
you can't just ask a
You
whole
need
band of people to do that. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I found it to be a lot easier than I thought it would be
Mhm.
to get around, even during the pandemic. Like the pandemic made it way harder, obviously.
Yeah.
Because I was like really doing my best to, I was wearing a mask and I was distancing and I was like, when I would stay in someone's place, I had to make sure that everybody had their own space and we had to be very, very cautious. And so that definitely made it a lot more difficult. Before that, like January, February, and March, I I had more than enough places to stay everywhere I went. And I found it really easy to get gigs by just going to jam sessions or open mics and just like meeting people and playing and jamming and I made a point to hit up any connection I had in that city, and I
Yeah.
also made like announcements to my social media like, hey, I'm gonna be here, tag anybody you know in the city that I should meet.
Yeah.
And so I had a whole list full of people that I could contact when I got down there. um, and so I found myself with just like plenty to do. I played so much music and always had more than enough places to stay.
Wow.
And what's wild to me, like kind of an interesting piece of the puzzle, was that in that year during the pandemic, like when I did my taxes that year, I made half of what I would normally make in a year. And I still traveled the whole country.
Wow.
So it was like, it wasn't as expensive as I thought it would be to get around. And, of course, I was relying on, the fact that people were willing to bring me into their houses sometimes. But like, there were places in the pandemic, I was like renting out houses. Like there were a lot of places where I needed a place to myself because we're
Yeah.
all isolating.
Yeah.
But because everything was locked down and everyone's Airbnbs were all canceled, there were places where I would stay somewhere for a month and only pay $500 to be there, or like I stayed in a place in New York City where I had the entire house to myself because everyone was out of town. And I think I paid like $50 a week just to like cover
New York
my
City.
expenses.
Wow.
In Brooklyn, yeah.
Wow.
And that's obviously a very unique situation. You're not going to find that all the time. But as a musician, when you're traveling around and doing something cool, people like want to help. They want to be part of your story. They want to support you. It's like when you're doing something cool and interesting,
Absolutely.
people get excited about that. They
Yeah.
want to be part of it.
Yeah. That's exactly right. It allows them to be a part of something and to
Yeah.
think big, right? The idea
Yeah.
of traveling living in a new city every month for
Mm-hmm.
a year is
Mm-hmm.
thinking big and out of the box.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was like when I would go to a new place and someone would ask, where are you from? And I would tell them what I was doing. They were like, wow, I've never even heard of someone doing
Yeah.
that. And then now that I've done it, I'm like, I don't know why people don't do that. It was cool. It was really awesome. And it was the kind of thing where, like I said, it wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be, even though the pandemic made it way more difficult.
Yeah.
It still was like so satisfying. And, I would definitely do something like that again if I got
Sure.
the urge to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was great.
Yeah. But right now you're in Nashville. You're
Yeah.
performing tonight, and
Mhm.
in Seattle. You're in Seattle like in a couple of days, right?
Yeah, yeah, I'm going back to Seattle to play a show with Mary Lambert. We're playing at a Seattle Sounders game, which is the soccer team up
Yeah.
there. So yeah, I'm flying out tomorrow to be in Seattle until Monday.
That is so awesome. And I just want to make
Yeah.
sure that people know who Mary Lambert is.
Yeah.
She's a
Yeah.
two-time Grammy-nominated artist.
Hmm.
She was the singer on the Macklemore song.
Same love.
She's
Yeah.
amazing nationally. There's people who listen to different genres of music,
Yeah.
so they may not know the stature of artist that she is.
Yeah.
When you first connected with her, first of all, what was that like? And had you been on like that level of stages and tour up until then?
So that was my first big tour, my first like pop artist. She was signed to Capitol Records, and so I had never done anything like that before. And the way that we got connected was, I think she just posted to Facebook that she was looking for a drummer in her band, and a couple of my friends like messaged me and were like, hey, you should get on this. She's really cool. And so what I did was I contacted two of my friends who had also toured with Macklemore. I knew Hollis Wongware and Andrew Jocelyn,
From
and
the scene.
from the Seattle
Mm.
scene. And so I messaged them and said, hey, I see that Mary Lambert is looking for a new drummer. Would you put in a good word for me? And so they both sent her a message saying like, hey, we know this drummer that might be good for your band. So that when I emailed her, like I just sent her a message and said, hey, this is who I am. I would love to, audition for your band. She was like, oh, you've already come highly recommended. I would love to work with you. Like she already had two people
Wow.
that she trusted who vouched for me. So it was cool. It was like real genuine connections with people who I really loved playing with, and they were able to kind of get me in the door because they also had a really close relationship with her.
Wow. How long did you tour
Yeah.
with her? Well, you're still performing with her, but that initial
Yeah.
time when you went on tour, how long was that for?
So when we first started touring, it was kind of a bit of a whirlwind. We had like a 6-week tour where we were opening for Gavin DeGraw and Matt Nathanson, and then we had 2 weeks off. Then we had another 6-week tour where she was headlining and Gillette Johnson was opening, and then we had, I think, 1 week off, And then we had 3 weeks of touring where we were flying back and forth to like a new city every day.
Wow.
And we were playing arenas. It was kind of the like the pop radio circuit, Jingle Ball Bash type of thing. So, you know, we were playing with like Train and Pharrell and Ariana Grande and Megan Trainor and like all the bands that were big on the radio at that time. And that was like 6 months basically of just like from when we started to the end of that. And then after that, she started focusing more on recording
Yeah.
and doing less of the pop thing and more kind of her orchestral spoken word poetry, and like composing stuff. So after that, we went on other tours, like some West Coast tours and East Coast tour, and but they were a little more spread out. We weren't like touring all the time at that point.
Yeah, that's what an awesome experience. And
Yeah.
you probably learned so much, and it gave you
Yeah.
the courage to do some of the cool things that you've done after that, right? You're like, we could do things, right?
Yeah, totally. Well, and I love touring, and touring is hard and it's not for everybody. A lot of people would not want to do what we do. But I love it, and I really connect with the traveling around and playing to new crowds every night.
Yeah.
So I love it. I'll go on tours as often as possible because I really enjoy traveling and playing music.
That's really cool. You've actually also been on like TV. You've been on like Good Morning America and VH1. You know, what were those experiences like? Tell us about it.
So Good Morning America is really cool. We did that twice, and it's like they film it in the morning, so you have to show up to the studio at like 3 a.m.
Morning. Oh my gosh, that early?
Yeah, so we show up at like 3 in the morning, and then they tape it at like 5, I think, and then it airs a couple hours later. And it's really fun, and it's very much live, single take, like this is it. You get one shot, and yeah, it's really fun. And with our band, you know, we have members that have been playing together for a long time, and so we feel great about the songs. You know, like there's no, you know, you're not like nervous or worried about it. You just get to shine. You know, you get to play your song. And for me, you know, as a drummer and someone who's been playing since I was a kid, I always wanted to do that. I always wanted to be on live television and, you know, on big stages and touring. So for me, it was just like really fulfilling to finally get to do it. And yeah, and then you get to meet all the TV hosts, and like the second time we did it, the celebrity guest was Hugh Jackman.
Wow.
And so like you're like passing him in the hallway, you're like, that's Hugh Jackman, you know. But yeah, it was really cool. And you know, like I think millions of people see that show, so it's you know, it's pretty cool to get to say that you've performed in front of millions of people, you know.
Absolutely. What an amazing experience.
Yeah.
I think that, and I want to make sure that we get a chance to mention this. You're an incredibly accomplished drummer. We're talking about new music that you have coming out, the touring you've done, the TV shows you've been on, but you also offer drumming lessons. If someone can take drumming lessons from you, there is a way for them to do that. Can you talk to us about how people can get drumming lessons from you?
Yeah, I love teaching. I've been teaching drums since I was in high school, and it's something that brings me a lot of joy just to be able to share with people and get them to be able to, you know, fulfill their dream of playing the drums, which so many of us just want to be drummers. And I'm like, yes, you're a drummer. Come on, let's go. And so the way that you can book with me is I have a link in my Instagram bio. It's like a link tree, and there's a place you can click that's just book a drum lesson. And that's for either online or in-person lessons if you happen to be in the same city as me. And then it's also on my website, which is heatherthomasmusic.com. And those are kind of the two best ways. You can also, you know, send me an email or a direct message, and we can talk about that kind of thing. But those are for me, those are the easiest ways. If you just click that button, there's like a little app that you can fill it out, and it accounts for time differences, and it'll send you a reminder. And yeah, so I love teaching. I love helping people learn how to play the drums, because drums are the most fun, and I really enjoy getting to see somebody learn how to keep a beat or learn how to do a cool drum fill or play a song that they've always wanted to play. I love teaching, and I always am available for online or in-person lessons.
Well, and in addition to your, performing with literally hundreds of bands, touring the nation as a drummer, your own music, Heather Thomas Band, you have a degree in percussion. So you're, all the way, this is completely professional drumming lessons, and you have all different levels of drum classes, for beginner to, you know what you're doing, but you need a little extra. Because on your Drumeo videos, you show them how to hold sticks, how to do different things, more advanced techniques, right? So all of that.
Yeah, and the Drumeo videos, there's kind of a cool range of what you can get through that. Drumeo is you can pay for their service and you get access to even more stuff. But even if it's just on YouTube, I've got one of my most popular videos is a practice pad, very simple warm-up called Stick Control.
Yeah.
And it's one of those books that's been around since the 30s, and every drummer ever has studied out of it. But there's a really basic exercise that's just single, like eighth note pattern for an entire page. And I have a play along video that can help. If you've never done it before, I help show you how to do the entire page. And it's great because so many people use it as their warm up or as part of their practice routine. And it's such a fundamental skill that like drummers of any level benefit from doing it. Even if you've never played drums before, you can get a lot out of just starting that practice. But if you're a experienced player, it's still valuable to go back and drill those fundamentals. So that's a good one. And then I also have videos about how to play the drum fills that you hear in your head, how to get comfortable practicing so that you can build fluidity into your playing. And I also have videos on how to sing and drum at the same time, since that's something that a lot of people want to know how to do once they see me do it. So I have those up there as well.
That's so cool. And I just have to say this because you'll never say it, but when I went through and I listened to all your music, the drumming and the drum patterns are so complex. There's so many nuances. You don't do the typical boom, boom, pap, boom, 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 pap.
Right.
No, it's very well studied, thousands of drum patterns, and the drumming sounds very unique for the type of music that you're doing with those songs. It flips into a bridge. It's a lot of thought into the drumming, a lot of love into. I mean, this has got your name on it now. It's not just the thousands of hours of practice and performing and working with other bands is apparent when we listen to your songs. That you're like, okay, this one's mine, right? And you can hear it in the drums,
Yeah, and that's something that people comment on sometimes because as a singing drummer, like it's hard to sing and drum even when you're playing basic beats. And my beats are not basic. They're, and not to say that they're overly complicated, but there's definitely stuff in there that's really syncopated, or the hits are very specific. And, I'm playing those complicated beats and singing over the top of it. And, like in the song that you shared at the beginning, that song has like some time changes and some kind of more complex rhythmic overlays. And I'm still like, that's fine. I'll do all that. And I'm still going to be singing the song, the melody, the way I hear it over top.
Yeah, it's really awesome.
Thank you.
You have on your website the option for people to become like super fans. Can you talk to us about the Launchpad?
Yeah, so my launch team is basically before I left for my 2020 trip, I thought it would be helpful to have some type of like a way for people to support me on that journey. And so a lot of people brought up, oh, you should start a Patreon. Right. And I was like, oh, I'll look into that. And so I looked into Patreon and I really liked the idea. But when I filled out the thing and I got to the point where it was like how much percentage they take out of it, I was like, do I really need them for this? And so I decided that I would just take their idea and build my own version of it on my website so that instead of promoting Patreon all the time, I was promoting go to my website, click on this link, and you can become a monthly supporter. And so I still have some people who are monthly supporters. And yeah, and it's one of those things where if you want to support an artist, like just giving a small dollar amount is such an effective way to, because we are continually investing in ourselves and in our art and in the process. Making music is very expensive.
It is.
Every single part of it seems to be so expensive. And so yeah, that's my launch team. And I think I might go in and kind of revamp it. I've gotten to the point where it's not super active these days. A lot of the people who are putting money in are just kind of happy to support. Yeah. But it would be fun to get back into it and like come up with some new incentives or like rewards or stuff. But yeah, it's still up there. You can become a member of the launch team.
Especially with the new album.
Yeah.
About the in 2023 music
Totally.
videos.
Yeah.
Heather Thomas vinyl. I mean, there's like it's endless, right? So it could be really cool. I've noticed on a couple of videos also that you sometimes play a small guitar.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, talk to us about
yeah, so what you're seeing is actually a ukulele. And it's like the way that I play my ukulele, it's actually kind of tuned closer to a guitar, because normally on a ukulele there's like a high G and then a C, E, and A. And on my ukulele, I tune that high G down an octave. I use like a special string, so it's a low G. But what that means is that it's actually the same tuning as like the highest sounding 4 strings on a guitar, but up a fourth from there. So it kind of transfers a little bit closer to what a guitar sound might be. But yeah, that's my ukulele, and I basically picked it up when I started writing songs because I wanted a way to perform my own songwriting, but I was like tired of every gig I ever go to, I have to bring a whole drum set. And I was like, what's the opposite of that? Give me something small. And so I picked up ukulele because I also thought it would be easier to learn than guitar because the chords are a lot simpler. And now I'm learning how to play guitar and keys, and I'm really enjoying that process. But yeah, for a lot of my solo stuff, I'll play ukulele.
Wow.
And there's ukulele on the album. There's a handful of songs on the album that don't even have drums on them. And there's like, like one of them is a very mellow ukulele driven tune. There's maybe two like that. And there's another one that's like just voice and synthesizer. It's just a Juno with my voice. And then there's another one where there's drum beat, but it's like a programmed loop of a drum beat. So it's kind of interesting. I think the album itself is not what people are going to be expecting, because for one, it's not a super like drummer heavy album. It's very much song based.
Yeah.
And also every track is very different. Like from song to song, it's not really the same genre. And so it's kind of like, it's interesting because, you might get an idea of what you think the album's going to sound like, but by the end of it, you're like, wow, I wasn't expecting that, So it's kind of, I think it's exciting. I'm really excited to share it because I think people are going to be really kind of pleasantly surprised, song after song with what comes next.
Yeah, it's like it shows your growth as an artist, as a creative, in your songwriting and other instruments. So that's really exciting. As we start to wrap, I want to make sure that people know the best places to find you online. Like, where do you live online?
Yeah, I would say I probably spend the most of my social media effort on Instagram, and my Instagram is Heather on Drums. I'm also starting to post to TikTok, and that's also Heather on Drums. My website is heatherthomasmusic.com. My YouTube is youtube.com/the @ and then Heather on Drums. And then where else am I? I'm also, you can search for Heather Thomas on Spotify or Apple Music or Amazon or Tidal. I'm also on SoundCloud under Heather Thomas. And yeah, those are some of the main places you can find me. I'm also, I'm all over the place, but Those are kind of the most effective ways to get in touch with me. And I think Instagram is probably where I spend the most of my efforts.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And performing regularly, and a new album dropping in 2023. And there's a new single called If I Die. You can pre-save it now, and it drops on July 7th.
That's
I think
right.
we're all looking forward to that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope you have an incredible gig tonight. You're jumping off
Yeah.
this and headed down to Broadway for
Yep.
your gig. So, have a great show, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.